Paul Hughes versus Usman Nurmagomedov. What a fantastic fight for the PFL on Saturday. I think it is probably the best it's definitely the best PFL fight I've ever seen. Many have been calling it the best PFL fight ever. I can't say that I've seen enough PFL fights personally to really make a concrete statement on that and guarantee you that that is the best PFL fight ever. But it's got to be up there anyway. It's one of the more entertaining fights I've ever seen, and an incredible performance by both Usman Nurmagomedov and Paul Hughes. They elevated each other's game. They made each other better fighters on Saturday, and I think it was both fighters had an incredible performance, but particularly Paul Hughes as a 6-1 underdog looked fantastic. Now, Paul Hughes, this was only his third fight in the PFL Bellator promotion, and just his 15th fight of his career. Usman Nurmagomedov has had more professional fights in his career, despite being a year younger, as well as more championship experience. This was his third title defense and the Bellator lightweight champion. So Usman Nurmagomedov was the much more experienced fighter, and I think that showed at times throughout the fight. He had a timely takedown in round three, following his foul on Paul Hughes. He's had several low blows against Paul Hughes, got penalized for it in round three. And right when at the end of the break, he went for the takedown and really secured his first takedown of the fight. And then in round four, following another break due to a clash of heads, he got another timely takedown. This one was less effective for him, as even though that Paul Hughes was on the bottom, he was landing much more strikes and really had more damage despite Usman having top control. So this was really a really close and competitive fight. But Usman had a little bit more experience, and I think that showed. And I think probably ultimately that's why Usman did get the decision. However, I disagree with the decision quite strongly. Close fights aren't robberies. So you can't say that Paul Hughes was robbed, but he won more than one round in that fight. With the point taken away by Usman Nurmagomedov in round three, they gave him round three to make it 9-9. So Paul Hughes only needed to win two rounds to secure a draw, and two judges only gave him one round, with another judge giving him two. I thought Paul Hughes won three rounds, but these were really close rounds. So really, anything besides round one and four were quite up in the air. But I thought Paul Hughes actually won round three, which really would have made my scorecard look a lot different. But I thought Paul Hughes, after getting taken down, by Usman Nurmagomedov, which I mean, after a low blow, he got up and he continued the fight, and I thought he landed more damaging shots. So in terms of like which fighter, uh, you know, landed more damaging shots, I thought that was Paul Hughes all night. Paul Hughes looked fantastic. He looked like he was the tougher fighter in there. And I think optics kind of told us that with the clash of heads. Obviously, I think Usman Magomedov was really hurt in that situation. As so was Paul Hughes. Paul Hughes was cut, but Usman got on the side of the head, so it was a little bit worse, and he definitely took that time to recover that he needed to, and he obviously has the right to recover in that situation. But Paul Hughes, with the blood pouring down his face, standing in the center of the octagon, waving Usman Nurmagomedov to fight more, smiling at him. Once Usman got the takedown, Paul Hughes was talking to him and landing strikes of his own. In the fifth round, one judge gave Paul Hughes the fifth round, despite Usman probably having, more control due to the wrestling and landing some knee strikes and just being in a better position. He had some knees to Paul Hughes' thighs there. But Paul Hughes, the fighting Irish, Paul Hughes, almost nearly taken down twice in that round, and he got two switches on Usman Nurmagomedov, and the last 10 seconds he got one, which I think surprised everybody in the arena, everybody watching the fight. Once he heard the block for the final 10 seconds, Paul Hughes scurried to his feet, secured the switch. Had Usman Nurmagomedov hurt with several body shots, and emptied the tank to close out that fight. And Paul Hughes is the real deal, ladies and gentlemen. What a fantastic fighter. Personally, I think when it is all said and done, when Paul Hughes' career ends in 10, 12, 15 years, whenever he decides to retire, he will go down as the greatest Irish mixed martial artist in history. He will be the greatest Irish fighter in history. And I think not only that, he will be one of the greatest of all time. And I think realistically, I think Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov are the future of this sport. Now, the lightweight division is the UFC's, most prominent division. That's where really the star power has come from in the UFC over the last, 10 plus years. We've got Conor McGregor, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, Islam Makhachev, Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson. There's Paddy Pimblett's there right now. Paddy Pimblett's a pretty big star. This is where the stars are in the UFC. That's where they have their superstars. But a lot of these guys are either retired or they're, kind of towards the end of their career. Charles Oliveira will be 36 this year. Dustin Poirier has one more fight left. Justin Gaethje's 35. He says that he doesn't have that much time left. He probably only has a couple fights left. Islam Makhachev is going to leave this division at some point, probably in the next year or so, you'd imagine, especially if Bilal Muhammad eventually loses. His UFC championship, Islam Makhachev would definitely move up to 170 in that scenario. Michael Chandler, he's about 38 years old. He's going to be 39 this year. A lot of these stars are up there in age now. Khabib's retired. Conor's MIA. So, they're going to need new blood in that lightweight division. And the UFC will eventually, I think, will both have Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov fighting under the UFC banner. And I think those will be the two guys I think we're going to see these guys compete against each other for the next 10 years. 5 years anyway. 5, 7 years, right? Of who is going to be the best lightweight in the world. This is not a set. This fight didn't settle who's the best. I don't think you can say Usman Nurmagomedov is better than Paul Hughes. I don't think you can say that Paul Hughes is better than Usman Nurmagomedov. They're better at different things. Usman Nurmagomedov is definitely the better grappler. Paul Hughes' takedown defense is phenomenal. Elite takedown defense. He can go up against any of these guys. And I think he looked fantastic in his takedown defense. Usman Nurmagomedov got credited for 4 takedowns. None of them were really impactful takedowns. I think the longest takedown he had was at the end of round 4, and Paul Hughes was fine being on the bottom because he was landing some vicious elbows and some vicious shots of his own. Actually, if we go to the graphic, we can see that Paul Hughes actually landed more ground shots than Usman Nurmagomedov, which was quite impressive. And yeah, this was a phenomenal fight. And I think we're going to see these guys fight again. We have to see these guys fight again. And I think Usman Nurmagomedov stating that Paul Hughes needs to win 3 or more fights. I think he wants to see this fight happen in the UFC because I think Paul Hughes will follow Usman Nurmagomedov to the UFC, and I think the minute Islam Makhachev signs a contract for a fight at 170 pounds, my bad, Usman Nurmagomedov will sign with the UFC. I think Usman Nurmagomedov is going to try to go to the UFC in the next year or so, and it'll take Paul Hughes about a year to fight 3 or 4 times, maybe even more, depending on health and injuries. So I think, this fight will probably take place in the UFC eventually at some point, but the PFL is going to want to make this an immediate rematch because this is not over. This is not settled. Paul Hughes wants that belt. He wants that rematch in Belfast. He wants it in Ireland, and he deserves it, quite frankly, because he is probably going to be the A side in this next fight. Optics-wise, Paul Hughes, with the blood pouring down his face, waving Usman Nurmagomedov on, he won over a lot of people. he displayed elite toughness. And he was definitely the better striker as well. And I think we really saw that in those championship rounds. And yeah, that fifth round was incredible. Paul Hughes came back and won that round in my eyes. I know it's a controversial opinion. Usman Nurmagomedov had control probably for the majority of that round, but Paul Hughes landed the more damaging shots uh, all night in rounds 4, in rounds 5, in rounds 3. I thought he looked phenomenal in this fight. Usman Nurmagomedov was, very poised. Picked his moments. That championship experience. He had Khabib in his corner, Islam Makhachev in his corner, Javier Mendez in his corner. Those are a lot. Those are three guys there in his corner with a lot of championship experience. And when he goes to the UFC in the next year or so, he's going to have a lot of championship experience himself. So a phenomenal fighter Usman Nurmagomedov is, and I think him and Paul Hughes are going to challenge each other for a long time of who is going to be the best of them. We're going to see this fight a lot. They are elite already. They are in PFL Bellator right now. The best fighters in the world are in the UFC. These guys can compete with the top 5 fighters in the UFC right now. You know, Usman and Islam Makhachev will never fight each other. They've made that pact. That's pretty clear. Islam Makhachev is going to leave for 170 pounds. Eventually, probably in the next year or so, Usman's going to head over to the UFC. It's going to be Usman Nurmagomedov, Arman Saruki, and Ilia Topuria are going to be in that conversation for the best lightweight in the world. I imagine Charles Oliveira will probably have a BMF title of some sort. He's always going to be in that conversation. He's always a dangerous fighter himself. But again, Charles Oliveira is towards the end of his career at this point. So, those three fighters that I mentioned right there, they're going to be competing for that lightweight belt. And, all three of those guys are about 27, 28 years old. And then, I think Paul Hughes would probably be in that conversation if he was in the UFC. I think, but he has a 3-year contract with PFL. Year 1 is winding down. I think Paul Hughes is probably going to be a lightweight champion in PFL Bellator, especially if Usman Nurmagomedov leaves. And from that point, he has championship experience as well, and he's going to go to the UFC with a lot of experience under his belt. I think eventually all the best prospects go to the UFC. But the UFC not having these guys already kind of goes to show you that they really don't particularly care about the up-and-coming fighters being on their roster. They just think they're going to get them eventually. And they very well may. But, Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov, if they were there, if that fight was on the UFC banner right now, it would be, everyone would be talking about it. And the PFL did the best they possibly could do in this fight, but these guys can do something even bigger. They are at the level where they can fight in the UFC and have a massive fight and be championship status in the next year or two. And it's coming for both of them. And these guys are going to be two of the best we have ever seen in this sport. And, unfortunately, I think, something that I'm going to think in this fight until we see it again is that Paul Hughes was the rightful victor of this fight. I thought the judges' scoring was all over the place. And that goes to show you how close this fight really was. But let's take a look at the judges' scorecards here. Judge Sal D'Amato had round number 4 going to Paul Hughes. I disagree with that fight on my own personal scorecard. I had rounds 2, 4, and 5 going to Paul Hughes. Round 3 was a very, very close round. All 3 judges gave that round to Usman Nurmagomedov, which only would have it be 9-9. As Usman Nurmagomedov had the point deduction in that round for his third low blow of the round. That was a really close round in my opinion. That actually could have went either way. But again, at best case scenario, that's 9-9 for Usman Nurmagomedov. And then, Judge Eric Colin here only had round 5 going to Paul Hughes. I think this is probably the worst of the scorecards because I thought round 4 was a clear Paul Hughes round. And the other 2 judges saw it that way as well. The clearest rounds to score in this fight were rounds number 1 and number 4. Usman Nurmagomedov clearly took round 1. Paul Hughes clearly took round 4. Eric Colin probably liked the fact that Usman Nurmagomedov secured the takedown following the headbutt, and after the break, Usman Nurmagomedov got a pretty timely takedown, but Paul Hughes was landing the more vicious strikes in that exchange and actually had some of the more damaging strikes. Usman Nurmagomedov did nothing with that takedown, despite having some control. And that takedown exchange, if you go back and look at it at round 4, that is why Paul Hughes ended the fight with more ground strikes than Usman Nurmagomedov, despite having no top control time. So that was a really interesting exchange. And in terms of damage done, Paul Hughes clearly won round 4. And the other judges saw it that way as well. Judge Hadi Ali, they had it as a draw with rounds 2 and 4 going to Paul Hughes. To wrap things up here, if you haven't seen this fight already, I recommend watching it. You can see it on HBO Max. If you go to the Bleacher Report sports area of HBO Max, you can watch this fight, Road to Dubai Championship Series. It's a fantastic fight. It's very close. You can watch my video afterwards, take a look at the judges' scorecards, and let me know what you guys think in the comments below of Paul Hughes versus Usman Nurmagomedov. Personally, I believe these guys are going to not only be competing for the best lightweight in the world for the next 5, 7, 10 years, however long their careers may be. I think they're going to be competing for the pound-for-pound best in the world. These two are fantastic fighters. Usman Nurmagomedov is about to turn 27 years old in April. Paul Hughes will turn 28 in March. And he's only had 3 PFL Bellator fights under his belt. Usman Nurmagomedov has had much more. But still, these guys, they're just scratching the surface of how good they can be. And that's what makes them so exciting. And I think these are 2 of the biggest stars in MMA for the future of the next 10 years or so. This is the new wave of mixed martial artists coming in, and they are fantastic. And I can't wait to see the rematch. I hope the PFL is able to book this rematch in Belfast in 2025. We need to see this again immediately. I know Usman Nurmagomedov wants Paul Hughes to wait and get 3 to 4 more wins under his belt. I think that's Usman Nurmagomedov not wanting to take this fight again. I think he knows Paul Hughes can beat him, and I think Usman Nurmagomedov knows he will be in the UFC by the time Paul Hughes gets 3 to 4 wins under his belt. And I think the PFL knows this is the fight to make for them. This is the money fight, and I think they are going to make this in Belfast in 2025. And I think Paul Hughes will be the victor in the rematch because I thought he won the first time. It was a fantastic fight, and I think we're not going to see this fight more than just one more time. The UFC will make this fight. We're going to see these guys compete for a long time, for years to come. And what a rivalry that has been created by the PFL with Usman Nurmagomedov and Paul Hughes. And I can't wait to see more of it. And please like and subscribe. And thank you again for watching. And be sure to follow the Interim Title Show on Instagram.